churn out with grades and workers for the future? And how do you balance structure with freedom for young people to develop holistically? Lots of difficult questions to answer. So as usual, get in touch with the Podbean, ttradio.org, or on the Twitter.
Live from London, this is The Drive Home with Seb Ventura on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry, I stumbled a little bit on that intro there. What I was actually trying to say was, is learning more than just the alteration of LTM? So that's what Ofsted said a couple of years ago. They define learning as any sort of way that your long-term memory is altered. That means you've learned it. But I think there's obviously a lot more to it than that. But yes, today we're going to be getting our teeth stuck into that debate. So how is everyone? Okay, hopefully we're all enjoying our summer holidays. I don't think anybody now should still be at work. I'll be very surprised if you are. Hopefully people are now beginning to unwind and chill. The weather's been fairly kind down here in London. A little bit rainy yesterday, but yeah, it's calmed down and very warm today. So wherever you are listening from, obviously you're not driving home. I know that's the name of the show, but nobody's driving home. Well, you might be driving home from a holiday or driving home from the shops, but you certainly shouldn't be driving home from school. So first of all, I hope everyone is okay. I don't know if anyone has been watching the Olympics. I know the football took over for a while, but now it's the Olympics before the Premier League all kicks off again in a few weeks' time. But I just have to say well done so far to Team GB. I haven't managed to actually watch that much of it yet because obviously a lot of it is in the night. So I kind of tend to get up too late some days at the moment to watch any of it live, but I certainly have watched them back on iPlayer. So really well done to Team GB. So far, I think we're on, the last time I looked, about 18 medals, 5 golds, 7 silvers and 6 bronze. So well done to Mallory today on the canoeing silver and Matthew with his trap bronze. Anyway, so that's just a little bit of hellos and how you do's. That's the beginning section of the show that I like to do and kind of connect with everybody out there. But I want you to message me today. I want you to call in. I want you to message me on the chat, text me on the messaging. I've seen a couple of people joining the studio. Welcome to those people. But yeah, let's just get on with what we're going to be discussing today. So today's show, we're going to be looking at, well, this is kind of inspired by a book that I've recently come across by Gary Keogh. And Gary is going to be my guest later on today, about 4:30. And we're going to talk to him. He's very, very interesting man and a very interesting book. And he's got a RE background and a philosophy background. So his book is looking at schools and pedagogy, but a really philosophical angle on it. So just to sort of contextualize that a little bit, what we're talking about today is the following. So have schools become factories? Are schools now just set up to churn out grades and create workers for the future of society? And have we become too driven by capitalism that all we do is produce people for the economy? Or is it that actually that is necessary? I want to know your opinion. Do we think, obviously, the purpose of schools, in your opinion, may be that we have to get kids grades so that they can get into college, or they can go to uni, or they can get a job? So that's the first thing. Of course, no one is going to say schools are not there to get students grade or education. But what Gary kind of argues a little bit is, has it become a little bit too far that way down the road? So I know I've been teaching for 16 years. I know when I started, I was far more, naive and ambitious about what I wanted to do with education, change people's lives, etc. And I know we still do that, but I think recently the emphasis in the last 5 or 10 years has become more about changing people's lives through grades and getting them, target grades, etc. Now, of course, please call in and argue these points out with me. I really would welcome that. But what we're trying to look at today, guys, is the debate between the balance between one side, which is our role as teachers and as schools to get students the best grades they can get to give them the best future chance. And the flip side, which is, have schools become too driven by league tables, pressure, Ofsted, targets, and has it just become too much of a that is all the kids are there for to do, and that's all the teachers are there to do, and anything else is a bonus? Because what the argument is there from Gary and other people, and myself slightly on this argument, is that then we lose a sense of the person, the holistic person, the young person coming through the education system, through primary and secondary and key stage 5. Are we there? Are we just pressuring them too much? Now, we all know mental health in young people is at an all-time high, poor mental health. We know that well-being for teachers is at an all-time low in terms of there's massive issues with that. So this is not a coincidence, I don't think. If we've got kids struggling, you've got high numbers of teen suicides, etc., and depression in young people, coupled with teachers having burnout, teachers having well-being issues because there's too much pressure and work put on them by their schools or by their SLT. So all those things have happened, and have we lost sort of sense of what we're there to do? And are we there just to really help young people develop? Is the school system even set up properly? There is an argument that, you know, I think it's, 65% of students or something like that, I think, that go on to full-time education or beyond. And then what happens to the other 35% that just get left behind? Is the school system set up for them to fail? Is there a pressure that schools are there and they don't give enough choices? Particularly, I would argue when you're in year 10, I think there should be far more vocational options for students. You know, there's kind of kids in year 9 that are switching off for whatever reason. They're switching off from school and they're finding it hard and they're getting into trouble. And often that's just because school does not suit them. And either they get through those 2 years and they go on to do vocational courses, or they go on to do apprenticeships or whatever. I'm not in any way judging any of these people, by the way. I'm just throwing it out there that actually, is the system set up for those people to fail? Should we be offering different routes? Should schools have flexibility in the provision they give? Or should it just be that we all just follow the count, you know, toe the party line, do what the government tell us to do, hit our targets, and get the best grades we can get in the league tables, which sounds a bit horrible, but I also understand that is part of it. So listen, there is no real right or wrong answer. Gary will be helping us to pull this apart when I speak to him later, because he's written a massively important book on this, which he's sent me an extract. It's not actually out till August, but Gary very kindly sent me an extract so I could get my teeth into it. And it is really interesting, and it's a lot of food for thought. And it has made me think, God, actually, have I become a bit of a victim of the system myself? Have I lost touch with what the purpose of education is? So get in touch. I can see a few people joining the studio. Good afternoon to everybody on this lovely Thursday. Blue Jane there, Keo G, which I'm hoping is probably Gary, who's going to be on the call with us later. Be a big coincidence if it isn't Gary. Patrick there, Florence. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining me today. Whether you're a first-time listener or maybe you're someone who follows the show regularly, as always, if you're listening through the Podbean, maybe this is the first time. If you are, welcome. Just click the call in button and the little phone icon at any time, or just send me a text in the chat if you want to contribute, and I'll read it out. You know, we can pull some of this apart. So I will be speaking to Gary in a short while. So Gary, if you're going to call in, just hold your horses for a moment if you can, because we're going to have a quick ad break before I speak to Gary. What I will do before Gary phones is I will give you a bit of background about him and what his deal is. So basically, Gary is he trained as an RE teacher in Dublin. So I'm hoping Gary's got a nice Irish accent when he phones in. He worked at university and adult education in Dublin. He then got into teacher training in Dublin. He moved to the UK. He's a lecturer at the University of Manchester. He then went back to secondary school teaching RE, and now is currently a PSHE lead and an assistant faculty lead in RE at a college in Macclesfield. He also is a lead tutor in theology at Hibernia College, Dublin. So this is the guy to speak to about philosophy, I think. But we're going to be talking about it with a pedagogical twist. So what I will do when Gary phones in, I've got a few key questions to ask him, and I'm hoping he can talk to every one of the listeners today about his book, not obviously purely to publicise it, but obviously we want to give Gary the kudos. So if anyone's interested, they do go and buy his book, but also just to get the topic of the book out there in the stratosphere on Teachers Talk Radio to any teachers listening, to hear about it, because honestly it's so interesting. I really love the conclusion that I read, and I actually want to read the rest of the book now, because it's super interesting. So what I'm going to do is we'll have a quick ad break. Please don't go away, and then as you're all joining us, I'll give you a bit more background on the book, and then we'll speak to Gary. So we'll have a little ad break first. Don't go away.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts, or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.cre8tiveresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TT Radio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful, and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TT Radio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. Introducing the Leadership Masterclass series by Diana Osagi. Learn how to ditch your fears and develop your leadership confidence. How to deal with difficult colleagues. How to thrive when you lead in a challenging environment. And how to get colleagues to buy into your vision. Join Diana for her online leadership masterclasses starting on the 10th of July and running all the way through the summer. These sessions are the perfect way to prepare and refresh for the next academic year and beyond. Book your place at courageousleadership.co.uk/events now. The first 50 leaders to sign up get an additional free mini coaching session with Diana herself. Don't miss this. Courageous Leadership Masterclasses at courageousleadership.co.uk/events.
Yeah, so good afternoon to everyone. Today we're looking at the pedagogy of purpose. So what is the point of schools? What is the point of education? I know that sounds a bit ridiculous, but we do have to sit and reflect in 2021, especially with all the things that have gone on this year with online learning and remote learning and Google Classroom. You know, what is the point of schools as institutions? Are we there just to get kids' grades and push them out the door and say good luck, get a job and work for the rest of your life? Or is it a lot more about building citizens for the future? I'm not talking about, you know, an hour of citizenship lessons or British values. I'm not talking about any bolt-on. I'm talking about how do we develop long-term, you know, young people for the future of this world that are going to, you know, be kind to each other, respectful to each other, be aware of their own mental health, look after the planet, be kind, all these kind of things that we have a responsibility as teachers, I think, to do. But it's not just about that, is it? You get paid to do a job. You've got to deliver, you've got to get those kids grades, and of course they need life chances. So this is the debate we're having today. So welcome to Tom there. I'm sure Tom's going to enjoy this kind of discussion. You know, where do you sit on this line of your role is to just get kids good grades and to educate them in your subject? And where do you sit on the role of that as schools, have we got things wrong as a system? And I'm not blaming anyone here. I'm certainly not blaming teachers. I'm just looking at the way the system is set up by this country. I mean, you may be listening to us from abroad. If you are, please get in touch, because I know that Sweden and America and countries across the world do things very, very differently to the UK. But certainly the way that the UK system is set up, you know, is it set up for kids to fail? You know, learning is messy. We know this. Learning is not linear. But is the system set up in a linear way that just doesn't allow growth and mistakes, because everything is so, you know, do this, do that, get this, do that? Have the league tables affected us in a negative way? People would say competition's good. People may say it helps parents choose a school, etc. But actually, has that put unnecessary pressure on schools and heads to just, you know, get grades up and not worry about anything else? You know, I know some schools don't offer drama anymore. That's just this catastrophic, in my opinion. Some schools don't put so much emphasis on the arts and the school productions. I just don't get that attitude myself, because I know kids learn so much from working with other kids on shows. Obviously, I'm a drama teacher, but you know, you see firsthand kids develop. That's not necessary. I've had brilliant performers in my school shows. They've not even chosen GCSE drama, and I'm upset about it. But I'm like, okay, I understand it. You want to pick other subjects, but they're still developing. They're still getting things out of being in a school show. The other thing to think about, and this is a point that Gary makes in his book, is the fact that as teachers, we have all probably had a successful experience of the education system. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has, because I know there are some teachers that have come into it from different angles, but let's just generalize for a moment. We've all probably had a fairly successful experience of the system in order for us to get the grades to become teachers, yeah? And also, we're passionate about it, which is why we work in that system. But does that actually give us the best opportunity or the best set of eyes to see how it doesn't work for some kids? Because we're almost biased in a way because it's worked for us. Does that make sense? So I think that to see how some young people struggle, and if you're more of a pastoral person or a form tutor or head of year, you may have a lot more time for this argument. But I know that it's not always one that gets a light shined on it. So are schools factories, or are we places that should grow young people and grow culture and really educate? And I know some schools are much more down the line of this, in that that's what their SLT is about. Some schools are in areas where they're much more struggling, and therefore they just have to concentrate on getting those kids grades. You might be a school that requires improvement, and therefore, you know, those things are a big deal to you. Hi to Paul there joining us as well, and SFern50. Thanks for joining us today, guys. So yeah, if you missed the beginning, what we're looking at today is, what does learning mean in terms of schools, how we produce students, how we get kids through our system, what are they supposed to be like at the end? Are we just a grade factory to get them subject, just to get them grades, which again is an argument, isn't it? Because if they don't get grades, they don't get college places, they don't get jobs, they don't get to uni. So in that way, you could argue if we don't do that, we're failing them in an even worse way. But is there an argument that some of those kids would succeed anyway? You know, the more academic students, or those kids at the top end, have they got good parent support? Are we just facilitating them? And actually, are we looking more at the other 30-40% of students, that young people that get failed by the system? You know, is there too much pressure on exams, on students and on teachers? And although that's the most important thing, really, is it also about how they feel and how we feel? I mean, you make the analogy with football. It's not a very good one, but let's just make that analogy, you know, where you see teams that win the league and people say, well, they won the league, but they didn't play very good football. Or Jose Mourinho is an argument. You know, people always say, but he wins trophies. Well, he doesn't anymore. But anyway, he used to. But actually, was football the loser because his football was dull? You know, is it always about results? Is it always about the end game? Or should it be about how we get there, the process? young people making mistakes, learning, developing, making friendships. I'll just read you out, before we speak to Gary, I'll just read you out a quote that I saw on Twitter today, which is from this guy called Danny Steele. I don't know much about him, but I just saw it on Twitter today, and I thought this is a perfect one for my show. He said, "I hope my teacher is nice. I hope I have friends in my class. I hope I have someone to sit next to at lunch. I hope I can get my locker open." And he said, "Students come to school because education builds a better future, but that's not probably what kids are starting to think about." So that's not really, I guess what he's saying is that we may believe that, but actually, is that why kids come in? Is that why and this is the whole thing with COVID, isn't it? The lockdown, parents realizing that actually what those students have missed out on, for me, more than, you know, them getting a few months behind, which they have, but they've all got a few months behind across the country. So that shouldn't really matter, because you can then just change the grade boundaries, can't you? But the bigger loss is the social loss, and them not going. My son, for example, was supposed to be in the school production in the last year of primary school. He was in the Wizard of Oz. He was cast. He had a part. Never got to do it. Was supposed to go on a school trip to Italy. Never got to go. And their experiences, he's never going to get them back. Never, ever going to get them back. Never going to be able to go back to that age and do that show. Never going to be able to now go to Italy on a ski trip with those kids. And yes, he might do a similar thing when he's older, but that's for me is a bigger loss than a couple of months schooling. Anyway, I digress slightly. I say howdy to Saul, who's joined us there, and hello to Peter and anyone else who's just joined the studio. That's great to have you on today. We are talking about schools, learning, what is the value of education, what is the purpose of our job in a kind of more philosophical way, and in a more kind of, you know, sort of looking at it in a more holistic way than just, yeah, I'm here to get grades, bang, my percentages are this, my data is this. Although obviously I know a lot of my colleagues would argue and say that's what we're here for, Seb. And that is what pays the wages. That's what we get paid to do. But come on, isn't there a bit more to it than that? So please get in touch. Pop us a message in if you agree or disagree, or you feel like you want to contribute. You can click the call-in button and let us know. Oh, right, I've got a message here from Saul, I think it is, or I think it's pronounced Saul. He said, "School was horrible for me. Both my parents were teachers." Well, I can completely empathise, because both of mine were, and my children have also got both parents as teachers. So I'll be interested to know what you mean by horrible. Was it because they put pressure on you, or was you just at a bad school? Hello to DK Gregory 22 as well. So yeah, we've got a few people joining us today, so I'm excited for this show. It's going to be excellent. I'm very looking forward to speaking to Gary Keogh, who is the author of the book A Pedagogy of Purpose, which is, I think, a John Catt publication. It's not actually out till August, but I'm sure Gary will clarify that to us, where you can buy the book from. It's a fab read. As I say, I've only read the last few pages that he sent me via email, but it certainly got me thinking. It really spun my mind with some really deep questions. So Saul's got back to me now. He says, "I was a weird kid. I think we all were, mate. I ended up writing a book called Sentiment and Oblivion." Oh, interesting. We'll get that on the Twitter. Send us some photos of it. We'd love to see that at TT Radio 2021 or at my Twitter, which is at Tributaka74. Yeah, so Gary's going to ring up in a short while. We're going to speak to him about all this issue. And the other thing later on that I would like to talk about, which is not really linked to this at all, but is if we get time after the news, after 5 o'clock, we may touch upon this, which is a little bit more of a trivial thing. But I would like to know about planners, because there's quite a bit of stuff on Twitter today about planners. Do you have a planner? Do you use a planner? Is it old-fashioned? Do you use digital? Do you prefer A4? Do you prefer A5? I know it sounds silly, but it's actually made me laugh, the amount of debate about planners and, you know, how people use them in their day-to-day. But we'll talk about that later. That's just one. If you're listening in and you've got a strong opinion about whether you use a planner, how do you use it? I used to, but I don't anymore. You know, I found it become a thing around my neck that I kept losing my planner, and that created more work than having a planner. But I'm sure there's lots of people who would disagree. I know Adam Boxer on Twitter said he got rid of his years ago and he uses Excel and he uses other software packages to track and organize himself. So maybe there isn't a need for planners, but maybe you're old school like me and you like paper and pen. So some of the things that crop up in Gary's book, obviously none of us have read the book, so I know it's a bit of a weird one because no one's sitting there able to comment because it's not out. But as a sort of background to it, there's lots of things in there where he talks about, let me just see, I've got a few little nice questions here that I'm going to pose to Gary when he calls. The fact that league tables have come in and the sort of competitive nature of capitalism, how that permeates education and how everything's set up to generate that. The fact that one size fits all, that's another thing he mentions about how that works with young people. Is it right that schools are set up in such a way, the system, that only certain kids will be able to access it and there's no flexibility? So Saul has now said, schedules always felt restricting. I do whatever I feel like when the mood takes me. Well, this is the argument really that we're having today. Schools can be more fluid and free if they're brave, but is there a need for structure? Now, some students I know like the structure. They like the organisation. They like to know the school day. They like to have a set linear pattern. That's how they feel comfortable. Okay. So we don't want to take that away from those kids. And then you've got other kids who are completely turned off by that and can't work within that environment and can't operate. Because remember, schools are like mini microcosms of society, aren't they? We have rules, we have discipline, we have structure, we have fun, we have socializing, we have bullying. These are all things that happen in real life. So schools are like mini versions of society, and you have peer pressure and all these things. So in a way, we should know better, and we should be able to make our schools work better within society. Saul is getting really involved in this, which is really good. Thanks for joining the conversation. He says discipline is necessary, but structure in terms of time can be more flexible. You've got to make it fun. I agree. But how far can we go down that road of making things flexible without it being chaos, which I'm sure Gary will enlighten us. And because Gary's very well educated, lots of qualifications, he's got a big background in philosophy, and he sounds like a very, very clever chap. Gary, if you are listening, you call in whenever you want now, mate. We're ready for you. And yeah, we're going to talk about some of these fantastic concepts that are in his book. Okay, so I think Gary is joining us now. So we'll be able to chat to him there. Gary, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, Gary. I can hear that lovely accent.
Super. Great stuff. Hope you're having a good summer, Seb.
I am. Are you, Gary, so far?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I think the Olympics are really kind of making it, extra special, I think.
I know. Yeah, it makes it a bit more fun, doesn't it? When did you break up, Gary?
Last Tuesday. So not Tuesday, just gone, the previous Tuesday. We broke up to the 19th of July, something like that.
Oh, that's quite early. That's quite early, isn't it?
Yeah, we were lucky enough. I think it was like there were some colleagues, that were finished on the Friday before, and then some not until the Friday after. So we were kind of like somewhere in the middle, which was it was good. I think it worked out well with coming back in September and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course. And where are you phoning from now? Are you in Macclesfield now?
Yeah, I'm in Macclesfield. I live here in Macclesfield in Cheshire, so it's just south of Manchester, I think, for anyone who doesn't know where it is.
No, I know it's north of Watford. That's about all I know.
Yeah.
So you've been listening to the show, Gary, have you, so far?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Good. So I read the bit of the book you sent me, which was really fascinating, and I hope I've kind of captured some of the sense of it. Obviously, I'm not the expert in this area. You are. But I just think a lot of what you wrote about really chimed with me in terms of feeling, I've been teaching 17 years and I did feel a little bit, not guilty, but when I read the bit you sent me, I was a bit like, oh God, yeah. Wow, I've just become a victim of it as well. Do you think that's what happens to teachers after a while? Yeah,
and even though I wrote the book, I feel that way myself. And I think part of the inspiration for writing it was kind of like, I love teaching, love my job, love my school, everything. But there's definitely times when you feel kind of just frustrated with that whole thing. And, as you said, like the reality is we're going to get brought into the head's office in September, the RAP meetings, to go over where your grades are in comparison to last year, in comparison to targets and all that kind of stuff. So, and then there is that kind of pressure on you that you kind of have to mold yourself to fit that, because, that's what you get paid for and your contract and all that kind of stuff. But, there's definitely been times, like many times, when a kid came to me recently just like in tears because she didn't do as well as she thought she was going to do in a mock exam. And you're kind of, you start to ask yourself, is that what I'm here for? Like, is that what this is meant to be about? Like, seeing people crying because they're getting a B instead of an A. And it's like, so those kind of frustrations kept kind of creeping in for me, and that's why I ended up writing the book about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it is difficult, isn't it? Especially when you see, it's not always, when you say you're a teacher and then you say it's hard, I think people who are not teachers presume that just means bad behaviour. That must be, other people who are not in the system think, the only thing that must be hard is controlling children or making them behave. But I agree with you, that for me, it wasn't the biggest stressor. The biggest thing that used to break my heart was seeing kids actually who are doing very well academically, then getting a B instead of an A, and then their parents being disappointed and them being disappointed, and then the competition of their friends getting better grades and how rubbish they felt about. It's just horrible, isn't it? That side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's especially when it comes to the sixth form and they don't get into Oxford or Cambridge, and, they go off to do a fantastic degree at a fantastic university, but because they didn't get that first choice or whatever, it's like this big disappointment for them. And then you have the other kids who are not in that race at all, who are, I think kind of alienated by the whole system because they're not getting anywhere near those kind of grades, and they're just kind of tipping away day to day.
No, exactly. I think there's definitely two areas to your book, and what we've been talking about that fascinate me is those students like you've described there, where the pressure of the system makes the mental health deteriorate, even if they're bright kids. That side I think is interesting to talk about. And then the flip side is the other kids that just get left behind because the system's set up for them in a way to fail when there's no vocational options. It used to be, didn't it? Back in the 70s, there'd be like metalwork and woodwork and, I know we've got DT and stuff like that, but it's not the same, is it? It's not like the old system.
No, and like as you said, I'm an RE teacher, so even RE, like it's academic guys. Is that the right term to use? Like it's been, and DT is the same thing. Like it still gets put into those measures, and that drama, music, like everything. It's like it gets it just gets everything. There's this obsession, I think, with trying to measure everything, and it's all about production and it's all about stuff. And I think you mentioned in your intro there, like. Are we factories? And there's obviously absolutely nothing wrong with getting good grades for kids. Like obviously that's absolutely not the point. That's not the point. But you are applying that same kind of scheme to every single person because obviously the vast majority of people go through the education system. So you're applying that sense of competitiveness, you're applying that sense of chasing grades and chasing universities or chasing sixth form or whatever. You're applying that to absolutely everybody. And for some people, it's just not applicable. They don't want to do that, and that's fine. And
then they're basically you end up. What's happened to me, if I'm honest about it, is I know that whereas when I started teaching, I might have seen those kind of kids and thought, oh well, it's fine. He's not really into school. Whereas now, because of all the things that have happened over the last 15 to 20 years, I can feel myself sometimes being annoyed with that kid. Do you know what I mean? Or kind of, and that's terrible. I don't want to admit that, but it's true. You kind of think, come on, get on. Why don't you want to get a better grade? What's the matter with you? You know what I mean?
That absolutely. I think that sums up my frustrations because sometimes you have to be that way. But I come home and I'm kind of like, why did I have to say that? Like, why did I have to keep a kid behind at lunch detention to finish a piece of homework if he didn't do it because he was out playing football with his mates? Or,
because what's it really gonna? The thing with that is, I totally agree. That one piece of homework, is it going to make a massive difference to his life, to his grades, to his well-being? It's not. But then the problem is, like you say, is the argument we're having today really is about the systems, isn't it? So somebody would say to you, well, if he doesn't get detention, he won't do his homework again, and then blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You know?
And we get caught up in that. And, you know, you're absolutely right. You get caught up in that. And that's why, you know, I used the phrase, like, very purposely on the book, is like, you know, we've lost our way. We kind of got distracted somewhere along the way, and we ended up going down too far down the wrong route.
Yeah, I agree. When do you think that, how long have you been teaching, Gary? When did you actually qualify?
About 11, 12 years now. But obviously,
Right.
as you said, I started in Dublin and then went into university in adult education for a little bit, for a couple of years as well. So
Yeah.
I've seen, you know, definitely, like, the book is focused on secondary school education because that's my job now.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, I've seen these things come up at university. I've seen these things come up in adult education and primary school education as well. So, you know, in terms of when, you know, like in the book, I quote philosophers from like 150, 200 years ago who kind of challenged this issue kind of in society at large rather than in schools. You know, people like Friedrich Nietzsche and Max Weber, and they talk about, you know, somewhere along the way, we got caught up in, you know, wanting to just work ourselves to the bone because we you know, John Calvin, the great Reformation theologian, like, when we lost our kind of certainty that we were going to heaven, we kind of replaced that with a work ethic.
Yeah.
You know, and I know I'm getting very philosophical and historical at that
point. No, that's fine. That's good. That's what we want, Gary.
Yeah. So, but I think, you know, when I read those texts, even though they're very old texts, I'm like, you know, that's just, we see that in society, you know, so much in terms of the things that we value. And it's like every year we're getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed more, like both in society, economically, as teachers. And that gets distilled down through the education system to the students.
Yes.
And, you know, you can understand aspects of it because obviously, you know, parents are looking at their children, or even children are looking at their future. And that's the world that they're going into. You know, they're going into this world of 0-hour contracts, or where you have to work yourself to the bone if you want to try and succeed, you know, inverted commas there. So it all kind of filters down, which, you know, that really bothers me. And I use the example of, well, if a kid wants to move to India and teach yoga every morning on the beach, or be a fisherman in Vietnam, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But we have this very narrow understanding of what we think success is or productivity is.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think it's the same, isn't it? It's the same with the social media thing, isn't it? Is that, you know, it creates, you know, the whole, you know, girls feeling, well, and boys, but everyone feeling rubbish about themselves because of Instagram and blah, 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 you know, and all of those things, you know, there is a life outside of that. And I think because if you're of a certain age where you existed before these things, you know, we can be more judgmental about it. But I think kids who've grown up with it as the norm, you know, it's so hard. You're fighting against, I even have conversations with my own daughter, she's only 10, that because I'm trying to make her realize that, like you've just said, there's nothing wrong with having those aspirations. You know, then the system, because it becomes a system, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I suppose when, you know, you asked when things got, you know, worse or took it down for the worse, you know, it probably did coincide with social media as well, you know, especially when you look at like the mental health statistics, and you have those kind of hockey stick graphs, like no matter what measure you use, from 2012, when the first iPhone was released, you know, it's not Apple's fault, but you know, when social media became such a big thing, you know, you see these mental health. You know,
no, totally. I mean, I think everyone's going to agree with that. Like you say, that graph, if you look at Facebook when it came out and blah, 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 you can clearly see there's a correlation. I don't think anyone would argue. But the thing I'm more interested in is, you know, you've been teaching about 12 years. I've been teaching about 16. And for me, the biggest thing was the reformation of the GCSEs, because up to that, because I'm a drama teacher. So up to that point, my subject, I could, to a certain extent, not worry too much about the written element at GCSE. Yeah. So that meant I could kind of focus more on the practical and the development of the actor and development of them and I could get away with that because actually the written work was only a small part. But then once those new GCSEs came in, which affected every subject, you know, with the increased content and the increased academic supposed angle to it, it just killed it a bit for me, because it just meant that I was actually, that wasn't what I was there to do. You know, it became so much more about writing and literacy and all these skills which are important, but not what I felt I was there to do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, and I do remember when the new GCSEs and A levels and many subjects also changed in around the same time, what, like 5 or 6 years ago, there or thereabouts.
Yeah, about that. Yeah,
yeah, and it was like, you know, I remember, like, for me as an academic, because I had done higher level degrees and stuff, the content was interesting to me, and I did enjoy that for a while. But it's like you said, you know, you use those examples, and we all know those examples of kids that, you know, it's, if we were to be fair, school's not really for them in the way that it's currently set up. And when, you know, so I teach RE, like, RE used to be, well, I think it still is great, but, you know, we used to have really great debates about, you know, organ donation and euthanasia, and we still have those debates, but we're also doing, like, learning St. Thomas Aquinas's theories and St. Augustine's confessions and stuff like that. And yeah, for academic people, that's great, you know, so I find it extremely interesting.
Brilliant, yeah.
But for the kid that's not going to end up going to sixth form or university, like, they just feel more alienated by all of that.
Yeah. I know. It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
We had a whole thing at my school a few years ago where we realised, I was an assistant head, and we realised that what we were doing, the push towards getting students to stay on into sixth form, was everything we were doing with year 11. So, you know, we were trying to use that as a motivator to say, get better GCSEs because then you'll get into sixth form, right? Yeah. Which is fine on the surface. But then what we realised was, actually, everything we're doing, the assemblies, the promotional materials, the emails, the contacts to parents, everything was focused around that. And then when we actually thought, well, only 65% of our kids are going to sixth form.
Yeah.
What are those other 30%? What are they doing in these assemblies? How do they feel sitting there knowing this is not for them? You know, what does that do to them?
Absolutely, completely agree with that. And again, to take it even further, like, it's the same with sixth form when we're given the assemblies, and okay, you know, this is your Oxbridge, this is how you do an Oxford application, and this is how you do a uni application, and you have kids, you know, whatever. I don't know the percentages off the top of my head in my school, but you know, I know it's 50% nationally, I believe, going to university. So when there's all this focus on university as well, as again, like, what are those other kids doing? Like, I think that they feel devalued. It's, you're almost like saying, you'll never, no teacher would ever say it, but because you're putting that emphasis on a certain lifestyle or a certain goal, you're kind of implicitly, inadvertently devaluing the other ones.
Yeah, I think that's it. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, you know, obviously you don't mean to give that impression to them, but you are. It's not what you say; it's what you do, and it's not in what you're explicit about. It's also about how you're implicit in it. And yeah, so I think it kind of devalues those things. And you, like, if a kid comes to you and says, "I really want to be a joiner," like, no teacher would ever tell them, like, that's a bad idea.
No.
But they're sitting in an assembly every week, as you said, talking about sixth form, talking about universities, and, you know, how what's the kind of for them, reading between the lines of all of that is basically saying, like, I'm not good enough to be part of the system.
I think you're right. I think what's interesting, I know you only sent me the conclusion to your book, but I did notice that coming through, this idea of implicit, because, you know, ultimately, like you say, I know I'm guilty again of this, of I can say things explicitly and be very clear and say, well, actually, obviously, these students are going to go to sixth form, these are not. These students are going to take my subject further, these are not. You know, I mean, I have it even in year 7 and 8. I can see already the kids that are going to take GCSE drama. I can already see the ones that are super keen, and I can also see the ones that hate it, you know, but the problem is, like you say, it's the implicit conversations where, or where my own thinking is being coloured by the pressure on me to get big numbers at GCSE, you know, the pressure on me to make sure that my students are making progress, however that's judged, however ridiculous it is to judge progress at the age of 11 in drama. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But then implicitly, I'm having conversations, one-to-one interpersonal conversations with kids, which are not, now I look back, I think they weren't really appropriate, because I was too much, you know, come on, you've got to get up and perform. And if you don't perform, you'll never be able to do it in an interview for a job. it's those kind of things now. After reading a bit of your, I was like cringing to myself, thinking, "Oh my God, why didn't I just say, do you know what, mate? It's fine if you don't want to perform."
But there's such a cultural thing about that, because for so many people, they will say, well, absolutely, that's right, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
We should be ambitious, like we should be competitive, and like, again, just coming back, because I still have the Olympics on the TV here, but it's on mute while I listen to you. But that kind of like competitive nature, and push yourself as hard as you possibly can, and all of that. I mean, many people will say, well, yeah, absolutely, that's what you should do. You should fulfill your potential. But as you said, like at what cost is all of that coming? You know what I mean?
It's such a balance. This is what's so fascinating. And I know there's not really an answer, but I do think, like you say, the Olympics, and the world that these kids are going to go into, it's no point, kidding anyone that they're going to go into a world that isn't competitive, or, that they're not going to have to be driven to succeed. We're not saying any of that.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. The problem is culturally, it has become overtaken by money. It's been they're the drivers, and actually the school system, because it's not business, is it? It's different if you're talking about a workplace. If someone's not productive in a workplace, they get sacked. That's the end of it. There's no black and white. It's just clear to me that. But schools are not businesses, or they shouldn't be. And I think that's what they've become in a way.
I agree, and it's also the choice as well, because we often forget, like, the kids didn't choose to be there.
No,
as a society, we have decided that every single child should be mass educated, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. But when to again go back to that Olympic comparison, like, those athletes chose to go down that path, and you choose. Okay, I know I'm gonna be seeing that guy from Leeds, the swimmer, the breaststroke, amazing British breaststroke. Adam Peaty. He chose to do all those trainings and go to gym sessions. These kids are not choosing to come to school.
No.
And there's absolutely, I love when kids come to school and they work really hard and they get great grades. They go off to Oxford to do law or medicine. Like, it's great, and of course we should celebrate it. But there's also the kids who kind of just tip away and work a little bit and get decent grades, or if they're nice to people, if they develop good friendships, if they enjoy their time at school, and they come out with mediocre grades, but they end up in a job that they like and they love, and like, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but we've lost sight of that, I think.
I know. I think it's difficult, because my old school was that I worked at previously to where I am now. I think the problem, was I can see now the both sides of the argument, and we had a lot of kids from deprived areas, and their parents maybe hadn't gone to university. So we were always aspiring to get these kids to go to university, quite rightly, and saying to them, come on, just because your parents didn't go, they don't kind of aspire to do it. And we had loads of lovely kids that we managed to get hooked on the idea of going to uni when they might not have done. So again, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's all positive.
Yeah.
But how we did that was kind of, a full-on, attack or forceful kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but kind of, a kind of marketing strategy to get everybody and let's do this and let's promote this and let's put posters up. And that's great, and it did work. But then it is, like you say, the pressure on the others.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole chapter in the book on kind of social class and that very issue about the university thing. Like, when I first floated this idea of a book, to a publisher, they kind of came back to me and basically said, well, why are you moaning about the education system? Like, you've got 5 degrees, you've got a great career out of it. Like, and like, I came from working class family. I guess neither of my parents went to university, but I loved uni. Like, it was great. I loved every day. It was fantastic. But you said those kids coming in that are from deprived areas, like, if you basically reading between the lines, what they may, and I know this is not your intention, but what they may read from that is, my family's lifestyle is not good enough for you. You want me to be more like you. You want me to dress like you. You want me to talk like you. You want me to go to uni like you. You want me to do this. You want me to do that. And that can be very alienating for many people.
Yeah, Yeah, and I don't think it was
Yeah.
for most, because they could see our intentions, and we were trying to mold them and change their mindsets in a good, positive way.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Again, it's all about what's implicit. I think that's what's fascinating about what you've written, is that you're not talking to people. This is not a manifesto for change, for people to go out and start doing anything differently.
Yeah.
Although maybe it is, I don't
Yeah.
know. But I think it's sort of getting people to think about these little conversations and interactions and what we actually say when we don't say it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of just to kind of turn the conversation a little bit, I know you mentioned earlier about the, you know, these mental health issues. It's the same. It's the same thing, in my opinion, with these implicit conversations. Like, you know, have you ever had a kid come to you, and I've had a couple of times where a kid come to you and say, look, I just wasn't feeling good last night, so I didn't do my homework.
Yeah.
You know, like, how would that go down for a lot of people? And while we say a lot of stuff about like schools promoting mental health and doing good, and I know people are very genuine and put a lot of effort into it, but if the entire kind of culture is detrimental to mental health because of the pressure that it puts on people, well then, you know, these small posters that we put up in the corridor, or these small initiatives that we have, which are very, very well intentioned, and I would never suggest that. I don't know any teacher that doesn't care about, you know, pastoral needs of students, obviously. Absolutely. But it's, as you said, like, it's often something that we forget, you know, when we're getting the whip out and metaphorically to get the students to do extra work at the weekends, or come to summer schools, or come to, you know, summer reading, or doing this and that and the other. It's like, well, are we coherent in the message that we're sending?
Yeah, of course. I think you're right. I think it's interesting how quite a lot of schools I've worked in, you know, you get the SENCO or the SEN team, and of this, obviously they often, certain kids will go to them and gravitate towards them because they've got a bit more time for them, or they understand the issue. And because you're super, super busy, and I know, again, I've had this conversation. So let's imagine that child you're talking about there comes in, says, sorry, I haven't done the homework, I was too tired. You know, the instant response from me is, well, that's not good enough, or, well, we're all tired, or, you know, there's that kind of dialogue, when actually then you might dig deeper and find out that there's something else happening at home, which means that, you know, I don't know, he's helping feed his sister or whatever, or he's got a problem where he's addicted to his Xbox, so he can't sleep at night. You know, you don't know, do you? And the problem is, you can't get into those conversations with every single kid, because we aren't social workers. We are there to teach, but it's really hard. Really hard to get the balance. I'm just going to read out a couple of messages here, because Saul has been posting so many messages, and I feel bad because I've ignored them. I'm just going to pull out a couple. He said, one of these I don't understand. You might be able to help me with, because I don't understand what it means. So I'm being honest about that. He's put, Epicurean education is a better model than the factory model. Does you know what he means by that?
I believe it's a reference to Epicurus, who's a great mathematician, and any math teachers will be, you know, very familiar with Epicurus. But I think that ancient Greek philosophy and that model of education, and I do write about it quite a lot in the book, where, you know, they didn't really have this, obviously, the system that we have now. It was more, you know, people go and listen to older people or wiser people talking about stuff, and people learned that way. So I think that's what that's a reference to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And he says, I think this is a reference to what we were talking about earlier. I think he says those kind of comments that we were talking about, it destroys their sense of self, teaching them they're not worthy. So it is that kind of thing we were talking about. So, I mean, really, Gary, what we're getting to now is kind of the crux of the matter, which is, I know there's not an answer. Otherwise, you know, you'd be, you know, Lord and Master of everyone. But what, maybe you don't want to be, but what do you think is the way forward? I'm not going to say the solution, because that's too simplistic, but what do you think is the way? What can we do on a practical level as either schools, teachers, or governments to kind of swing the balance back to where you would like it to be?
Yes, it's a great question, and that's one of the reasons I think I put off writing the book for quite a while, because I really struggled to articulate, you know, one simple answer. And as I said, I don't think there is a simple answer. I have a couple of opinions on stuff like that, and I give some examples in the book about, like, from my own experience and from my own classroom, where certain things have happened to me, whether it's a behavior issue or whether it's a learning issue, and things like that. But I suppose, I mean, what I, maybe I'm being kind of cynical, but what I kind of suspect is that, whether it's Gavin Williamson or whoever it is, wants to go and give his report to whoever's in charge and say, look, this is how the education system is doing in comparison to other countries in the PISA rankings.
Yeah.
So in order to improve that, he will go down to obviously the heads of schools or the unions, the councils, and say, look, we want you to improve. They will tell the heads of schools, we want you to improve this much, this many percent. They come into September to the inset day to all the staff and say, look, we want to improve X amount of percent.
Yeah.
And then you as a classroom teacher have to go to your class and say, look, I want you to do get X percent better.
Yeah.
So that thing all kind of filters down. And, I think to try and change that issue, I remember very clearly, I know Ross Morrison McGill, I think, is on the programme tomorrow morning. And I remember him remember him coming to our school to give an inset day a couple of years ago. And he basically said, look, if we could get all schools to take down the Ofsted rankings outside and just put up a poster saying that if your kid comes here, they will be happy and they will enjoy their education.
Wow. Yeah.
And that something like that really kind of struck me. And it's just kind of changing those conversations away from grades. And I think, the small steps you can, like you talked about earlier, schools being more proactive in promoting their drama, promoting their arts programs, and just kind of celebrating those things in equal measure to, the great kids who get grade 9 at GCSE and things like that. And it's about how you interact with students on a day-to-day basis. Like I really think that teaching, like 90% of it is what happens for those 40 minutes to an hour in those four walls of your classroom.
Completely. I agree.
So it's how you are. It's an interpersonal thing with other human beings. Like we forget that kids are human beings. They have their own wants, ambitions, emotions, good days, bad days, and we kind of treat them like as if they're just hammers to hammer into a nail.
But maybe that's because we're sometimes teachers are treated like that.
Exactly,
so it's
exactly.
Yes. I know what you mean by that. I mean, I've been in meetings where I've been grilled about data as a head of faculty, and then what instantly I've done is gone out and grilled my team.
Yes.
And then they've immediately gone to their lessons and then probably been and probably then been more, it's not taking it out on people, but it's just an inevitability of the system.
Exactly. Yes, it's that inevitability of that competition, and the really, and we again, you might think people listening might think, well, there's nothing really wrong with that, but there was a quote from Ken Robinson in one of his books, that like. Was it Singapore have consistently been the top 5 education systems on the PISA rankings over the last 20 years since it started, and they're also the country with the highest level of mental health issues among young people.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so that's a good quote.
So that's not a coincidence.
No, of course not.
And some of the statistics that I've been researching just really shocked me. One of the one that really struck out with me in the research for the book was that 1 in 5 girls have self-harmed.
That's shocking, isn't it? Really.
Like, and I'm thinking I'm going into my assemblies now, and I have to give up. Well, we haven't been able to do it in a while, full cohort assemblies and stuff. But I go into a year group, a year 11s, and there's 200 kids there. And I'm kind of thinking, like, a couple of dozens of them are probably, having severe mental health problems.
Yeah,
and they're these kids that I know I see in the corridor every day, and I have the best wishes for them and everything. And those kind of things just shock me so much that I really think that we need to just adjust our attitude here in some way.
Yeah, I think really to summarize then that we're not going to be able to, me and you together now, we're not going to be able to change what Boris does or Gavin Williamson does or Ofsted do. But I guess what we can say to teachers listening is that, like you said, individually, we are responsible for that 40 minutes, hour, whatever it is. Yeah. And you set the tone. Now, we're not expecting people to now go back to their work and, not chastise children for not doing homework necessarily, or whatever it is, or not ever mention grades. We're not saying that, are we?
No,
but we're just maybe a better sense as we go into this post-COVID world, the mental health thing is not going away. The well-being bit is not going away. So do we really just want to employ, head teachers of the future and future leaders of whatever role and teachers as they're coming through to be a bit more flexible, maybe an understanding of the individuals.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you've just said there, and I think one of the reasons why we struggle to recruit so much is because of that disillusionment. Like you referred to it, your own experience. I've definitely had that experience where you kind of come in like fresh out of your PGC or whatever, and you kind of like, oh, I'm gonna change the world. I'm gonna get this kid who I'm gonna inspire them and all this stuff, and then 4, 5, 6 years later, your entire job becomes about data and becomes about
I know. That's what drove me to the edge.
And like I've had really good friends who were fantastic teachers, just got so disillusioned with it. I'm sure you know people. As well,
yeah, totally. Yeah,
just got so disillusioned with the whole thing that they just pack it in because it's just so disheartening.
But there's people out there that I know, colleagues of mine, that are strong enough to be able to do both, that have been able to say, look, I know that's what I'm there for. I'm really good with data, really good with dealing with management of that, admin of it, blah, blah, blah. But also laid back enough to go, yeah, well, I've done my best. And, actually what's more important is my kids' well-being. And I want my students to be happy. But it's so hard. I mean, these people are really one in a 100, I would say. You meet these people who are amazingly able to do both, but it's rare. It's very rare.
Yeah, trying to find that balance absolutely is key, because again, there's also the type of kid that we haven't really talked about is the kid that needs a bit of a kick at the backside.
Yeah,
absolutely, those kids exist, and that these kids would flourish if they went off to university and absolutely
exactly. I know, but I think, just to do one more quote from your book, the one size fits all is something you mentioned, and I think where we've got to be aware, like you say, is okay, that's the kid that's super academic, wants to go to uni, that's the kid that needs to kick up the arse, and that other kid is the one that the kick up the arse is not going to help, and that's one where, right, what else can I do to help them, or just listen to them, or just be there for them, or whatever.
Absolutely, and just not just again realize that they set up this target. This is one of the big issues, in my opinion, is the whole concept of target grades.
I agree.
Because, these things were set up when they were 10, 11 years old. A lot happens in those few years. I mean, I wouldn't like anybody to judge me on the basis of a target that they set 5 years ago, let alone a child.
That's a nonsense. It isn't.
It's not. It's just nonsense.
No, I agree. I think that is a big problem, and I don't know how we get away from that. I mean, I think getting rid of the the levels and the key stage 3 levels and all of that gave us as a school flexibility, but ultimately it still came down to, right, what do they get in their scats or cats or whatever, and then that means that kid needs to get this, otherwise you're a failure. As an individual, the kid's a failure if they don't get it. You are as a teacher, and the school is. That's the problem for me, is that, like you say, the target driven, fine, everyone needs a target, right? This is where you need to be at. This is where you currently are. I don't have an issue with that. But when it comes set from something that happened when they were 10 or 11, and that then basically brands them for life, doesn't it? That, for the...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, just interesting you were talking about your planners, like, and just to use an analogy like you use an analogy that teachers will be very familiar with. Like, I mean, I am a person who uses a planner, and I write my list every day. Just want to get this done today, I want to get this done this week, so that's like my targets that I want to do today or whatever. But like, I don't always do it, you know what I mean? And you need to be, okay, well then I need to change that for tomorrow. I need to change that for tomorrow, because you can't help external influences. Like, so
no, you can't.
You've got kids who are set targets, and then the parents get divorced, or they get sick and they miss 6 months of school, or there's lockdown, there's COVID comes along, pandemic comes along. Like,
and that's the problem, isn't it? And when you're looking at sort of trying to get 80% of your students their target, then to be outstanding or whatever it is, then okay, you've got a bit of leeway. We always had a bit of leeway to say, well, that kid's never going to get that grade because it's so inflated. But then it still didn't really allow for another third of the class to have had a bad experience or an emotional experience, or
I mean, I use the analogy when I had my RAP meeting this year, because obviously we did the tag, so those RAP meetings came at the end of this year rather than in September. But I basically said to my principal, like, look, if you're in a hospital and there's a disease that kills 90% of people, okay, every day, let's say, and then one day only 80% of people die, you don't go out and shoot somebody just to get your statistics in line. Do you know what I mean? Like, statistics measure something after the fact. They're not there to strive for necessarily.
No. No, I agree. Well, listen, we could literally talk about this all day and probably never get anywhere, and then we'd probably have to start drinking whiskey and I don't know.
No problem with that. No problem.
No,
with
exactly. But we probably, end up. So I don't want to end it on a negative. I'm gonna. Will you play my game before you go, Gary?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't mention this when I recruited you onto the show, but I do have a game that I play, and my regular listeners will know the game because I do it because it can get a bit. We can get a bit deep, and then it's just like I want to just let's end on a funny one. So thanks for your time. I really appreciate your call, and like I say, I will. When is the book out, Gary?
So on the 2nd of August. So it's like with
next week.
Next week, I think. So it's you can pre-order it on Amazon and obviously the John Cat website. So I think definitely all the usual spots you can pre-order.
Yeah.
It and,
okay. Well, I think people need to get. I'll certainly be going to get a copy because I'm fascinated by. Even though I've read the end before the beginning, I still would like to read it.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's really interesting. I like the way how you talk, Gary. I like how you think. So we'll get there. We'll get there in the end somehow. We'll try and change the world. Right. Okay. So I'm going to play the jingle. Listen carefully to the jingle, which explains the game. Okay.
All right.
The rules of the game are quite simple. You have two choices, A or B. You have to decide which of those options you prefer, with no explanation, no justification, and no judgment of your choice. It's just a choice, a simple choice. Listeners of the show can also take part, but will never know their answer. So the time is now, the pressure is on for you to
take your pick.
Okay, Gary, so we talked about pressure there. Now I'll put
okay, let's go.
Pressure situation. Number one, lager or beer?
Beer.
Football or rugby?
Rugby.
See, I'm getting a demographic now for you. Cycling or swimming?
Swimming.
Boiled eggs or fried eggs?
Fried eggs.
Now, this is a music question, not a monarchy question.
Okay.
Prince or Queen?
Prince.
This is a 90s movie reference now. Matrix or The Fight Club?
Matrix.
Tokyo or New York City?
Tokyo.
Monopoly or Scrabble?
Monopoly.
Ice lolly or ice cream?
Ice cream.
Okay, and then the final one is: should my kid go to a good school, or should my kid get good friends?
Get good friends.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer.
I think that's given me a to-do list: some ice cream, watch The Matrix, and
yeah, there you go.
Like
Of course,
go
go and listen to Queen's back catalogue. You know, you've got try some craft beers and lagers out. No, that's good. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us, and stay in touch. And I'm sure everyone really enjoyed listening to what you had to say. Thanks a lot, Gary.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it so much.
See you later. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Right, okay, well, that was a slightly longer call than anticipated. Sorry about that if anyone was wanting to move on to the hot topic of planners, but I had to really get into one there with Gary because I thought we were really getting some really good chat going. So apologies if that went on too long. I had some lovely messages from Saul, and I've seen quite a few people during that joining the studio. So hello to Sarah, Shannon, Visa Mumbai, lots and lots of people joining us. So welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to have a really quick news break, and then don't go away. We're going to talk about teacher planners.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn. In Scotland, there has been general agreement between members of the Scottish Government's COVID-19 advisory group that the mandatory wearing of face coverings in classrooms should be removed where possible. It has been suggested that ventilation and hand hygiene should remain, given their impact and ease of maintenance, and that physical distancing could also remain between adults and pupils in schools. The Scottish Conservatives have said that the success of Scotland and the UK's vaccine scheme means that face masks in schools are no longer a necessity, as the government's advisors have suggested. A Scottish Government spokesman said, "Our Education Advisory Group on whether or to what extent mitigations can be removed. This includes the wearing of face coverings and the self-isolation requirement for young people in education settings who are close contacts of positive cases. As part of our wider preparations for the new academic term, we will set out our plans and guidance for schools in advance of the new term." Dr. Patrick Roach, General Secretary of the NAS UWT, expressed concerns, stating that the fact that around 1 in 5 teachers may not have had the opportunity to gain full vaccine protection by the time schools return further emphasises the need for continued COVID infection measures to be in place in every school when they reopen in order to keep staff and pupils safe. As a result of an announcement from the exam board OCR that it will be refunding 42% of fees for GCSEs and A-levels to schools, the Association of School and College Leaders have now written to Ofqual asking for a formal review on the different levels of discounts. AQA, the country's largest exam board, will only return 26% of entry fees. In a statement, OCR said, "It is important to return as much as possible to schools and colleges, given the huge amount of extra work that teachers and leaders have done this year." Explaining the rebate, OCR said it had made significant cost savings, but had also faced exceptional costs, such as additional online training and support to exam officers and teachers. This has been your latest education news briefing.
Live from London, this is The Drive Home with Seb Ventura on Teachers Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today, we've been talking about what the role of schools are. Now we're going to be talking about the role of planners. A3, A4, electronic, paper. How important is your planner to you? Can you work without it or not? Please get in touch for the last 20 minutes of the show if you've got an opinion about a teacher's planner.
Live from London, this is The Drive Home with Seb Ventura on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Talk about planners. Okay, so we had a great chat with Gary. If you were listening to Gary, thanks a lot to him for joining us. If you listen to that conversation and anything has really piqued your interest, or you want to follow up from what Gary or myself have said, or you disagree or agree, then give us a call in, press the button, come in, or send a message. But we are going to move on to talking about planners a little bit now, just to change it up a bit. But I'm still happy to go back. So a message from Sarah Cardi. She says, paper planner is a key to a clear head. So how much do we agree with that? Are you obsessed about writing it all down and having it on a piece of paper? She says her notepad of that and her to-do lists go with her to and from school every day. What happens if you forget it, Sarah? What happens if you leave your notes at home or your planner at home? What will happen? You'll crumble into a pile of despair. She said, I've converted to an online calendar, but this online planner is a step too far. No, maybe that is. But what I'm trying to say to people is, as Adam Boxer said on Twitter, you know, what do you need it for? Is everything in there your registers, your mark sheets? Surely that's Excel. You know, you're not going to maybe put your lessons, your timetable into Google Calendar. That might be, no, some people might do that. I know I've never been able to do that successfully. So I've always liked to have my timetable printed out, which I guess you could slot into the back of your planner, couldn't you? But, you know, a lot of people have their planner and put each week, put their lessons, what they're doing. I know maybe a lot of NQTs or early career teachers, this may be like how you build yourself, your confidence in what you're doing. Is that I was always told as a trainee, make a note. Make a note after each lesson of how the lesson went, like a brief note, and put in there any students that stood out for being exceptional and any students that stood out as being maybe tricky to work with or behavior problems. And then therefore, let's say you're teaching 5 year 8 classes. When you then go back to teach that class again, you can look back and go, oh, it's that class. I remember that's the kid that I really need to remember, you know, is super, super bright, and asking, you know, them questions that are going to challenge. Oh, and that kid, I remember I had a problem with him. I need to make sure he's okay this week, and I'm helping him or helping them in a way that's going to facilitate better behavior. So that's always something I was told. And I know I kept on doing that for a good while until I became, you know, much more confident, but I still think it's good advice. Sarah's put useful reference when you teach multiple classes of the same year group or shared classes. That is the nemesis, isn't it? She also said she never forgot her planner in 12 years. I don't believe you, but anyway, maybe she didn't. So yeah, so do you prefer A4? Do you like a massive A4 planner you can write everything down that's heavy in your bag? Do you prefer a little A5 one? Does your school just use the standard teacher planner that's available, or do you have your own fancy down one? I know at the school I used to work at, we had our own personalised planner with our own, not personal to me, but personal to the school, with the school ethos all the way through it, which was always very cool, and we all loved getting one, but they're more expensive, I guess. So yeah, what's your deal? Are you someone that used to use a planner like me that doesn't anymore, or are you someone that would never be lost without it, or are you moving to the more technologically advanced world of being able to be a teacher without having a planner? I mean, that sounds crazy talk, doesn't it? But are there teachers out there that operate without a planner? I'm just going back now to so Adam Boxer says he hasn't used a planner in years, uses Excel, Trello, although I don't know what Trello is, and he uses Outlook/Teams for his calendar. And this all came about, this conversation, because Shabnam Ahmed, I don't know if you know her, but she is a TES blogger, and she wrote a thing in the TES, I think it was last week, about this whole issue. And it was basically 4 ways to work without a teacher planner. So if you haven't checked that out, it's on the TES. Have a little look at what she says. And she says, since she binned her planner, her classroom life has become easier. Well, I know that Sarah would certainly disagree with that, and I know there may be other people who are listening who disagree. So let me know, get in touch. I want to know your thoughts on this burning issue. We've gone from talking about the future of education with Gary and the whole crux of how we can be better educators to whether you need a planner or not. I know we've gone from one extreme to the other, but hey, that's how I roll. Right, so let's see. Paper planners all day long, Gary says. Nothing like the feeling of physically crossing something off a list. Bliss. Yeah, I get that. Listen, I'm not disagreeing with the idea of a to-do list that's written in paper, although I more and more make those notes, to-do lists on my phone. I get that, but I'm talking about the actual document of putting all your grades in it, your lesson plans, your reflections, your to-do list, your long-term plan. Some people I've seen, they're so systematic, they fold over the page when the week's complete, or they put a line through it. I mean, it all looks good, but I don't know if I could do that every week. But maybe people need that. Maybe this is why people find it as such a crutch or a tool for their mental health, to have a paper planner. I know people that applies to, where they feel like if they don't cross something off, they don't get a satisfaction, or they don't rip that page out and they don't feel like they've done it. But anyway, I mean, this is obviously very controversial, guys, and I know that if you're listening at home or in the garden, or you're chilling out, or you're in the car driving on holiday somewhere, I know you want to pull over and get involved because it's such a hot topic. And speaking of holidays, let me know where you're going. I've got a friend who's on Ibiza, lucky him. He won't be listening, I'm sure he'll be relaxing doing something else. But you know, for you people I know are going abroad, or have already gone abroad, some people I know coming back, seems like that's all getting a bit easier. But is it too late? Have you booked a staycation in Cornwall or Devon or Norfolk or Scotland? Or let me know. Right, we're going to have a quick ad break, And in the meantime, start formulating your opinions on planners and let me know, because so far only 2 people have told me that they support physical planners. Nobody's coming forward for the electronic crew.
Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful, and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
Right, welcome everyone. A couple more people coming in there. Oh, now I've really slipped the touch paper now. Is that the phrase? I don't know what the phrase is. I've lit something anyway. It's all gone. It's all kicking off on Teacher Talk Radio about planners. Finally, I've managed to stir up the hornet's nest. So, yes, Tim has come in. Tim is a regular listener. Tim, he says, I have a paper one for next term, but I'm going to give Planboard a go, which is an online tool. Planboard. Oh, I'll have to have a look at that, Tim. That sounds quite interesting. So anyone else use Planboard or know what Tim's going on about? Let us know. Faria has just joined in there and says, what's the topic? Can I join? Faria, you can join. Of course you can. We have been debating are schools just factories for learners, or are schools, are we there to help grow and nurture young people for the future, or is it just about getting them the best grades we can? That was our original topic, which we can still debate. If you want to get involved, just click the call in button, Faria, if you want to get involved with us, or you can send us a message. The topic we've moved on to is the slightly more trivial but still controversial topic of planners. So do you have a teacher's planner? Do you use it? Is yours paper? All right, so Faria, I'm not sure where you're calling in from. Please let me know. But she says in her country, they're still doing online education due to COVID. Or let me know where you're from, because that is, that is tough that you're still doing the online learning. Oh, Bangladesh, brilliant. Thanks for letting us know. So in Bangladesh, they're still doing online learning due to COVID. I mean, this is what's happening everywhere, isn't it? Not every country is kind of coming out of it in the way we are. Strict lockdown, of course. So that does affect what people do, and the way that you're moving forward for September. Faria, let us know, will you be like that in September, or do you think it's going to ease off, or is it getting any worse? Gordon Collins, hello to you. He's from London. He's saying he's paperless and he teaches music. So that'd be interesting to know, Gordon, how you managed to get through a day, because Sarah would be saying that's impossible. And I would be interested to how you do it paperless. So we've already had one suggestion, which is Planboard. Gordon, let us know how you manage to keep yourself organized, keep us up with your classes, your data, your to-do list. How do you do it all without that? Everything online. Great. So what programs you're using, Gordon? It'd be nice to know. So this is really, after all that deep chat with Gary, we've now got a massive load of debate about planners. Interesting, isn't it? What people want to call in about. So yeah, let us know. Keep those comments coming. We have got about 5 to 10 minutes left. A quick shout out to the shows coming up. So Kate tomorrow I think she's got Ross McGill. I think that's what Gary said earlier. So I think Kate Jones, she will be on tomorrow. I think she's got Ross McGill, but don't sue me if I'm wrong. We should also have Dorian on the morning break. Remember, guys, regular listeners, all our times have changed in the mornings because we didn't want to be having shows at 7:30 when people are having lie-ins. So now the breakfast show, which is normally at 7:30, is at 9 o'clock. So you don't need to get up so early to listen to Kate. Now you can listen to her from 9. The morning break then is at 11. Tomorrow it should be Dorian. The drive home stays the same time, and that will be with Alfred. And then we have a new host, whoop, whoop, new host, Krishna Sanal. Her first show is at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. So if you want to give her a shout and join, that will be lovely. I'm sure Krishna would like to hear from you. Saturdays and Sundays is the usual crew. And then from the week after, we've got a couple more new hosts joining us. We've got a host on the Drive Home show. And we've got Lucy, we've got Libby, and we've got Rebecca. So loads of new people coming on. Right, so so Faria in Bangladesh telling us that she's in a strict lockdown. That is a terrible situation. What do you teach? Let us know what you teach. Do you teach secondary, primary? What age group is it? And what subjects do you teach, Faria? Let us know. Be nice to know what your kind of angle. Gordon's told us he's in London. He's a music teacher. Gordon, it'd be nice to know a bit more about which resources you're using to do your planner electronically. And Tim has just mentioned Planboard. So that's my note to self, is I'm going to get off when this finishes in a few minutes. I'm going to go and have a look at Planboard. The problem you see, I think, with all of these is that unless you change your habit, it becomes difficult. So I remember thinking, right, I'm going to put all my timetable on an app, which was then on my phone, which was great for the first couple of weeks I tried it, but then I got out of the habit of using it and went back to my planner. So as my friend Paul Greendale would say, changing habits is one of the most difficult things for teachers to do. So in that case, do you start as a new teacher without a planner altogether, because you're maybe not as old as me, you're in the 21st century world, and you think, why would I use paper planner when I can do on computer? Maybe that's what people might think, not in a robot voice, but